want to talk to you about perfectionism and how this is killing your happiness and your chances at a successful, healthy, fulfilling relationship. First and foremost, the relationship with yourself. So I'll just dive right into it. So the perfectionism. So you may identify with being a perfectionist. You may find yourself super driven in your career. Maybe you have, multiple degrees. Maybe you are a single super mom and you strive your hardest to provide your children with the best life, better than you had it. And you work really, really hard in other aspects of your life. Perfectionism is ultimately a way for people to help themselves feel good enough. Perfectionism and people pleasing go hand in hand. Perfectionism usually stems from an upbringing, childhood conditioning where you had to be the good kid or the good daughter in order to win a parent or caregiver's approval. And maybe you learned early on that in order to get attention from people, you had to do a good job at everything that you did. The other flip side of this, people pleasing, which I'll talk about later on, is a trauma response. Essentially, we talk about fight, flight, or freeze. There's a fourth one that a lot of people don't know about called fawning. So fawning is when you feel the twinge of a red flag or something that somebody says doesn't sit right with you, or you're asked to do something in your career or you're asked to do something in a relationship that doesn't feel right for you. In order to preserve that connection and for people to like you, people pleasing is ignoring your instincts, ignoring your intuition, ignoring what's true for you in order to please the other person and to avoid abandonment. The root thing underneath both being a perfectionist and being a people pleaser is abandonment anxiety, the fear of being left, the fear of somebody abandoning you. Now, if you're a high achieving person in your career and maybe you survived a narcissistic relationship or marriage and you've survived and endured unavailable relationships, you might not consciously walk around thinking that you're afraid of abandonment. Abandonment anxiety and specifically perfectionism and people pleasing will keep you in the wrong relationships too long, and you'll get kind of sucked in this like back and forth crazy making cycle where it's good sometimes and it's bad other times. That whole toxic relationships are very, very addictive. In fact, the brain, if we do a brain scan on somebody falling in love and even somebody in a trauma bond, if we like do a brain scan and then put that brain scan next to somebody, a brain scan of somebody who's a heroin addict, those brain scans will look identical because the chemicals that are firing in your brain when you are trauma bonded or addicted to a person are the same set of chemicals and mapping that a heroin addict fires in his or her brain. So perfectionism stems from the belief or the conditioning that I have to be really good at what I do in order to win somebody's approval. If you're a perfectionist, you may also struggle with people pleasing, not knowing how to say no, not knowing when to say no, feeling bad when you say no, overextending yourself to the nth degree, and then feeling drained and exhausted. Perfectionism comes from the belief that you are not good enough. Now, here are 3 points that I want you to take away that I really want you to hear today. If you don't believe you're good enough, the first point that I want to make is that you are likely going to have a tendency to work hard. You're going to work harder. You're going to strive harder. You're going to do more. A lot of the women that we work with not only are super successful in their careers because they work so hard, behind closed doors, they're drained and exhausted and they're deeply unhappy and they never feel like they're good enough. They're also really hard on themselves, their appearance, their body. A lot of the women that we work with are in midlife, meaning late 30s, 40s, 50s, early 60s. Things change as you age. You have kids, you get older, your metabolism slows down, perimenopause, menopause, weight gain. So if you're a perfectionist, you're going to be extremely driven to work hard on yourself. The irony is is that no amount of hard work or no amount of doing or no amount of perfecting yourself is ever enough. You're still going to have the habit of picking yourself apart, criticizing yourself, comparing yourself to other people. So the thing that I want you to remember about perfectionism is that it's a no-win battle. The other point that I want to drive home today about perfectionism is that if you feel, and remember, subconsciously at the root of this stuff is the belief, the core belief that you are not good enough. If you're not good enough in point one, you're going to be driven to work really hard, be an overachiever, do more than your fair share, not know how to say no, want people to like you, drain yourself, burn yourself out. Then you're going to feel emotionally exhausted, depleted. You're going to be resentful. Those are all barriers to emotional intimacy. You're probably going to turn your resentment toward yourself. Why am I doing this? Why do I get into these types of relationships? Why am I now having a narcissistic boss? Why is this showing up in my career? You're going to ask all of these questions that are essentially beating yourself up. The second point that I want to make about being a perfectionist is that if you don't feel like you are good enough, you are going to be emotionally a match for a partner who on some level doesn't feel like he's good enough. I'm talking in heterosexual sense. This could be if you're gay or lesbian or whatever. That we work primarily with heterosexual people, but if you're homosexual, totally the same thing. So if you feel like you're not good enough, you're going to attract a partner who on some level also doesn't feel like he's good enough and may eventually start criticizing you or start tearing you down or start emotionally manipulating you as a way for him to prevent abandonment. So if you come into a relationship scenario with unhealed abandonment issues, unhealed abandonment anxiety, relational trauma, stuff from your childhood that you haven't fully emotionally dealt with yet, you're going to pull in a match for somebody else who may expect you to be perfect, who may be critical when you're not perfect, who may pick you apart. In psychology, we call this devaluing. You're going to devalue somebody, and this is usually a subconscious way of creating emotional distance so that you don't get too close to somebody so that that person can never truly leave you. The irony is these relationships always result in abandonment. That person may not leave you physically for a while, but emotionally they've checked out. So if you are a perfectionist, the first point that I want you to remember is that it comes from a belief that you're not good enough. Number two, you're going to have this tendency to work super hard in your life. You're going to, you may achieve a lot, you may accomplish a lot, you may accrue a lot of things in your life, outward success. But the irony is that it's like you're a hamster on the wheel. You never feel like it's enough. And you always feel you're never happy. And you always feel like you have to do more or be more in order to win somebody's approval. The third thing that I want to drive home here is that if you are operating in your love life or your dating life from the place of perfectionism, I'll give you an example. My mom, my parents were in an unhealthy relationship, and I grew up around that. And because my mom was so hell bent on making people believe that everything was fine at home, she was a perfectionist. She worked really hard to keep everything perfect at home so my dad wouldn't explode. So if you find that if maybe you survived a marriage that was similar or a relationship where it started off great, you were convinced that you met your soulmate, and then it slowly deteriorated, you may find yourself staying or making excuses or justifying or tolerating bad behavior and trying to be perfect, trying to be more and more and more to keep the balance in that relationship. If you also are a perfectionist and deeply don't feel like you're good enough, you're going to have more of a tendency to look outside of yourself for a soulmate or look for this person, this magical partner, to redeem all of your unfavorable qualities, to help you, make you feel better, make you feel complete. And that's, especially if you have relational trauma and you're looking outside of yourself for this person, this wonderful, the one, the magical relationship, you're never going to get there because subconsciously you attract and you get in life what you believe subconsciously. And if you believe on some level that you're not good enough, or there's this fear of people finding out that you're not good enough, and you strive to be perfect in everything that you do, it's exhausting. And when you live like that emotionally, you're operating from a sense of depletion. When you operate from a sense of depletion, you feel like nothing is, like, you don't feel fulfilled in your life. And unfortunately, a lot of people begin dating from that place. They don't truly feel fulfilled in their lives, and they start looking for love to bring that feeling to them. And ultimately, 90% of the time, that winds up in disappointment, because you can never make it somebody else's job to make you happy. You have to make you happy. And if you found that you're 40, 50, or 60 and your relationships follow a very familiar pattern, it doesn't matter where you move, how much time off dating you take, it keeps happening. There is subconscious stuff in you, belief systems, unhealed trauma that you haven't fully addressed yet. The final point that I want to make about being a perfectionist is that, and this is especially true if you have survived betrayal in a long-term relationship or marriage, and now you're on the other side of that and you're trying to date again and you're trying to put yourself out there. If you are a perfectionist yourself, meaning if you're hypercritical about your body, your appearance, if you are worried about people judging you, you are going to have a higher tendency to prejudge other people and have super high standards for the people that you date. Now, I want to qualify this and say that there's nothing wrong with having standards, and you should have standards, right? You shouldn't settle. But what I often see in terms of women who have a history of heartbreak and who have a history of choosing the wrong people and staying too long in the wrong relationships, and who are also outwardly successful, there's a deep core vat of shame. And she tries to fill or cover up that shame by being perfect. And then when she attracts a great partner, there's this tendency of picking him apart, of devaluing him, to create some emotional distance, prejudging people. Sometimes people that we talk with on breakthrough calls will say, I keep dating narcissists. And they only go on one date with a person before they automatically assume that that person's a narcissist. And so they tend to prejudge and pre-label people. And this is a way, it's her inner protector keeping her safe. So if you are a perfectionist and you find that it's hard to attract or feel fulfilled, number one, in your own life, and then have a modicum of success in dating, especially after betrayal in a marriage or relationship, you're going to project your stuff outward onto other people. You may have heard about projection if you research the narcissist. A narcissist is famous for projecting or blame shifting. You will do the same thing. You will do the same thing if you're walking around wounded and your core belief is that you're not good enough, and you essentially feel ashamed, or you're operating in your life from a sense of emotional depletion because your perfectionism is driving you to do more and be more and still never feel enough. So just to quickly recap, perfectionism comes from never feeling like you're good enough, usually childhood conditioning, the strive to do more and be more so that people like you. If you tend to get into relationships, the fact that you don't feel like you're good enough, you are going to draw in somebody who eventually will make you feel as well like you're not good enough. And this all goes back to what you believe, how you think, and how you feel. If you're a perfectionist, you may have a stronger tendency to believe that somebody, a soulmate, a partner is like your redeemer. That person's going to take all of the pain away. It's going to help you feel loved, help you feel complete. We talk to a lot of women every week who believe they just want a relationship and they want to feel that love. They want to feel that connection. And it's never about the partner. It's never about the guy. You have to learn how to feel those things on your own. And if you've spent many, many years, decades, believing that you're not good enough and believing that you've got to do more and be more and strive more, and you're still criticizing yourself, that is your norm. That's like your thermostat setting. That's what I call your emotional home. And in order to heal that, you have to, number one, be ready to heal that. I was sharing with clients earlier this week that I was listening to a podcast, and the host was saying that in the homeless population, 75%, it was a large percentage, 75% of homeless people who secure housing and get off the streets will within a few weeks find a way to sabotage their housing. They use drugs, they get kicked out so that they can go back onto the streets. Think about that for a moment. So if you have never had a healthy, emotionally close relationship where you felt safe, where you felt like you could trust the person fully, where you could trust yourself fully in that relationship, you are likely more comfortable with chaos and uncertainty and anxiety producing relationships. And you may find somebody who's predictable and who shows up and who's consistent boring. And you may use your perfectionism and project that out onto the other person and start picking that person apart to create a sense of chaos and to create a sense of uncertainty. So you have to, number one, decide that you're really ready to do the work, and realize that doing the work on healing your wounding and healing your emotional responses and learning how to emotionally regulate yourself and widening your window of tolerance to happiness, in the beginning, it's going to be uncomfortable. And we tell this to everybody who enrolls in Break the Cycle. Like, look, this is not going to be, at least initially, a cakewalk. You're going to have to show up consistently on days, even when you don't want to. You're going to have to do the work, even when it's, it brings up a lot of emotion for you. You have to be ready and willing to, for a little while, walk through the fire of your fear and face yourself and be real with yourself and be honest and compassionate and work a proven evidence-based plan to literally rewire how you think about yourself. It's never about the guy or the partner that you're meeting. It always goes back to you. So if you recognize that you're a perfectionist, if you've done a lot of talk therapy and you still beat yourself up, feel anxious, hard on yourself, compare yourself, feel like something's wrong with you, if that's still the nagging voice in your mind, you may need a trauma-informed method, especially if you identify with somebody who has childhood trauma or grew up in an environment where she had to be perfect all of the time in order to win love from her parents or caregivers. So a trauma-informed plan looks like somatic therapy, which is what we offer here, working a mind-body protocol, because trauma is not just up here in your mind. It's memorized as subconscious, meaning below your waking awareness, emotional reactions that happen in relationship settings. So if you find yourself dating unavailable people, if you find yourself in work environments even where you may have a narcissistic boss or a narcissistic coworker, and you're like, why do I keep getting into these situations? There's often something within you that needs to be healed, and life is going to continue to bring you the lessons that you need until you heal that pattern fully. So if you'd like to speak with us about how we might be able to help you heal that core relational trauma, help you feel confident, help you set boundaries, help you fully accept yourself, feel happy with yourself every single day, and then if and when you're ready, date and do so from that emotional home, then I invite you to book a free breakthrough call. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk. People who are an ideal candidate here have already had talk therapy. They feel like they've plateaued. They feel like they've kind of run out of things to talk about, but they still emotionally don't feel complete. They feel like something's wrong with them, and they still slide into these unhealthy coping patterns of being a workaholic, doing more, trying to be more, wearing themselves out, being resentful, codependency. You're single, meaning you're not still hoping to work it out with your ex. You're like 1,000% done. Maybe you still have contact because of legal issues, or you're separating your finances, etc. But other than that type of communication, you're like done. You're not wanting to go back. And then finally, you're successful in other areas of your life, other like home life, career, finances. These places are stable. And this is simply because healing complex trauma, or CPTSD, is best accomplished when other parts of your life are going well and you don't have these major sources of stress in your life that are going to derail you and keep triggering you emotionally. We are results focused here. We get people results in a shorter period of time. And in order to do that effectively, people have to have certain criteria so that we can help them get from point A to point B efficiently and effectively. So if that's you, then I invite you to go to bethanydotson.com/talk, and we will have a very honest conversation about how perfectionism may be derailing your life, how unhealthy relationship choices are causing you to continue distrusting yourself, even if you've been single for many years, and ultimately talk about the life that you want to be living and the relationship that you want to have in the future. And if we can help you get there, we'll talk about what that looks like. Have a beautiful Monday. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you soon. Take care.